Welcome to this week's edition of Pipeline Things. We have our guest here, our esteemed guest, Mr. Sean Moran. We get into the conversation of Emat technology, the Emat users group, and it's a great show. I'd also encourage you, if you have questions, we're going to have a mailbag show coming up where we will take your questions live on the show and do our best to answer them from any of the previous episodes. So you should see a poll or you should see a link. You can get it on LinkedIn to leave us that. Thank you for your support, and I hope you enjoy this episode. I feel like we always have to make sure we get that right. All right, welcome to this Wednesday's edition of Pipeline Things. I am your host, Thing 20, otherwise known as Rhett Dotson, and my co-host, Mr. Christopher De Leon, Thing 21, not lesser in prominence, but lesser in stature. That's the theme we keep running with here today. So it's great to be with you guys. I have to tell you, it's spring in Texas. The warm weather's coming to the air. The pool is really close to getting opened. It's just that time of year, Christopher, where you get to get out and about. And it's amazing out here right now. So,
it's just starting to feel great, right? March just kind of brings another level of energy, I feel like.
It really does. And I get excited. I get to spend more time outside. Baseball's about to be up and coming.
It's not Houston hot yet.
Not yet,
It's still kind of pleasant. There's a breeze.
Absolutely.
You know, all these positive things happening, like all the fun things that come with March.
Yep.
We've already enjoyed crawfish for a couple of weeks.
Yep. I was outside doing the yard work last weekend. We got the garden up and running. So what about you? What'd you do this weekend?
I got to watch some NCAA tournament basketball outside in my patio. March Madness, baby.
Oh, that's right.
March
See, you
Madness.
have a reason to be a big March Madness fan because U of H was actually in the tournament. It's been a while since A&M's been in the tournament.
Yeah. So we're on a back-to-back kind of. So we're Sweet 16 type situation. So everybody's really excited. Go Cougs.
Yeah.
We love you guys. Coach Sampson, you're doing a great job. You know, we have to give credit to coaches, right? I mean, organizational leadership is so fundamental.
Yes, it's true, especially in basketball, man, especially at the collegiate level. It's a team game. It's an organizational sport. You just don't get out of the court and throw the ball up and hope for the best. So,
you know, I'm starting to pick up a correlation of March Madness and did you do a bracket this year?
No, I didn't do a bracket this year, because last year when I did it, we actually put money into it as a family, and my 7-year-old niece won because she picked the team that she sounded the best, and I forgot who it was, but they went way further than anybody else predicted except my 7-year-old niece. Lost faith in my ability to do brackets at that point.
Yeah, I kind of feel like there's a correlation there with ILI. What do you think? You kind of put something in, and you expect to get something out when you expect it and how you expect it, and then what normally happens.
So yeah, I could run with this. I don't know if it's the way you wanted me to run with it, but yeah, you put something in, and there's 2 to the 63rd possible combinations, and you're hoping that only one.
And there's the engineer in red.
You just hope that one outcome, you get all the way to the end of the right 2 teams? Is that where you were going with it, or you had another thought?
That's exactly where I'm going with it, right? And there's different approaches, right? So some people, may want to take a broad approach. Some people may want to go and ask for help, and get some statistics. Some people want to go based on how the team sounds or the color of their jersey. Wow. And if you're not careful with how you make decisions, then you might not get the outcome you expect.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. That's funny. I think where we wanting to go with today's show, and again, for those of you who are on the YouTube thing, you probably noticed there is an empty chair in between us. We've got a guest that's coming up, and I think we're going to be talking a lot about Emat as a system and Emat as a technology, and that kind of probably fits with this vein. I think we can make this March Madness thing work for sure. So on that note, Chris, and just bringing it back around for the audience as we talk about Emat, you and I have both had some experiences on the Emat side, and I have to say, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I think your Emat experience is probably a little deeper than mine, and you've got a little more credibility than I do. And I'd like you to speak to that some of the audience. So as we get into this topic of Emat today, what's your background in it?
I'll keep it simple because I think today the show's about our guest
to come.
prior to working here at ADV, one of my first gigs was with Energy Transfer, where I had the opportunity to work with the industry to put together a guidance document for Emat and Emat repair and Emat in situ evaluation. So that then led into writing the company document for how we respond to Emat. Got to be involved in a couple of Emat projects where you had to make decisions on what to dig, what not to dig. That is the question, and it's based on different, fracture mechanics models. Which one do you pick? What material properties do you use?
Producer did not know that reference, but I'm not going to ask her right now. She's not happy with that comment either.
And so had some very hands-on, when you have to make it, is back to the March Madness bracket, when you got to pick who's going to win the tournament, it's you got to put some energy and effort into that. And so I had to do that a couple of times. And then obviously at our more recent employer with Rosen, worked as a business manager there for the advanced business units and put together the crack framework. And I think we both kind of managed more than a couple, if we could say that, different Emat programs and working with different Emat customers.
Yeah, I think I actually really enjoyed that side of things with Rosen, the trying to help the customer experience, I would say, and how they managed implementing Emat, some of them for the first time. And I think between the two of us, there's what's really cool is that you've got experience both from the vendor perspective, being at Rosen, but also from the operator perspective, being an Energy Transfer. And I think what's super cool is our guest today actually has a nearly identical background to you, and I'm interested to see how you and him, how y'all come at Emat with you two having come from different vendors and actually different operators. Yeah. So I think it's a good time to bring on our guest, and today we're going to call on Mr. Sean Moran. Yeah, come on, Sean. Come on, take a seat. Hey, man, so good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. So, look.
Thanks for flying all the way down just for this. Just for this.
Is this the only reason you came?
Yeah. Dream come true.
Man, you
in
see
today,
that?
out tomorrow.
I just want you guys to know, audience out there, Pipeline Things has reached a point where people will fly any distance, any time.
Private.
To be a part of this. We won't tell you how much the chartered plane was that we had to bring him down.
No, we didn't.
No,
we
but
didn't.
seriously, we're so glad that we could catch you while you were here. I think what's more surprising to me is you're an avid might be the right word, follower of Pipeline Things?
Yes, yeah. I've been following since episode maybe 3 when I was recommended.
I think 3 is where we picked up
advised by you two to listen to it.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I had to put in
We're on
avid.
episode 7. You're at episode 7 released?
Oh, wow. Hit the mic. Oh, gosh, Mr. Producer.
That's a no-no.
That's a no-no. That came across on screen. This is going to be episode 10, 11, somewhere in there. I'm not sure. I've actually lost count.
Maybe I missed some then.
No. You haven't released them yet. There you go. But point is, you've listened to enough episodes to know the shenanigans Chris and I pull, and you still opted to come.
I did. Well, and, I show up here and I'm told, hey, we got everything set up. Let's go. Let's do this.
Shop tour.
So,
we're going to do a podcast.
You didn't let him know he was going to be on the show before we brought him?
Ish.
That's questionable.
Ish.
I think there were some indicators.
So we just bring him in here and then throw him on the podcast.
Hey, they're not going to come do shop tours anymore. Yeah. You're going to throw me on the podcast.
Yeah, we're going to be.
I thought we were going to talk about wrinkle
outside.
bins.
Yeah, outside only.
Yeah.
Away from ADV.
Well, really, seriously, thanks for coming on, Sean. So I want to introduce you to the audience out there. So tell us a little bit. Who's Sean Moran? Where do you come to us from? How did you find yourself here today?
Well, yeah. So I actually flew in from Salt Lake City. You guys already know that. Great snowmobiling out there, as we all know. And,
so now they know who we went snowmobiling with.
There's some powder out there, boys.
Yeah.
That's some good powder.
So I'm actually here to do some work with API on the 1176 work group, which we will dig into a little bit later. But my background's actually from as you mentioned before, the vendor side. So ILI vendor. First worked with TD Williamson for about 6 years, helping develop their Emat program and a little bit on their MDS side as well. And then from there, I started working at Williams in 2017. So I've been working in the Williams. It's more of a specialty integrity group outside our standard integrity program, but initially to develop the SCC management program, and then now beyond that as well.
Wow, so it's really cool. So honestly, I mean, it's really in opposite order to Christopher,
Yeah.
but you and him share that common bond, right? I mean, I don't think I knew you were the product manager at TDW, but I don't think I knew you were specific to the Emat side. So that's really cool. And so now you've seen it from both sides. So I think it's going to be a really good topic to dive in today. And
Right. Do you know what Emat stands for?
yeah, oh my gosh, come on.
Hey,
This isn't like
101,
naming
bro.
the 7
Yeah,
corrosion
we need to
profiles.
start
for
that.
Let's
me.
see. Let's see.
Electromagnetic acoustic transducer.
Okay.
Really?
And what is it used for?
What is it used for?
Yeah, what would an operator use an Emat tool for?
Well, I mean, primarily it's to find cracks in pipelines when you don't have a liquid couplant such that you can use UT, crack detection technology.
So are you saying you can only use Emat in a gas pipeline?
Well, you can use it in liquid too, but really it's whenever you don't have that liquid couplant that it becomes very expensive to run a UT tool.
Okay.
Is this about me today,
I
or is
think-
this about
I think
Sean?
he got it. That's
He did okay.
100%.
He did pretty good.
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit.
That's good.
I kind of like.
No,
you know,
I love it.
You know,
love
how like when
Are
a
your
dog's
palms
ears
sweaty?
part forward and they go like this, right? You're kind
the
of like
ears or the hair on the back of the neck?
Why you coming at me like this, bro?
testing your knowledge.
Yeah,
Getting right.
So in a very public fashion, I felt threatened.
Keep you on your toes. So, Sean, talk to us a little about what is it like being an ILI product manager, high level, like nothing too specific, you know? So, obviously you're an operator, we can get into that, but the life of a ILI product manager, you know, is it just about the tool all day long? Like, what is it that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, well, I guess specific to my experience too. So it was on more new technology developments, which is actually a lot different. I mean, understanding how different technologies are developed too. I mean, you really have to understand the basics of Emat and understanding what does Emat do, how is it different than other ILI technologies out there. So a lot of the work initially I did was really understanding what value does that Emat technology bring to the market, and at what market, what does that need, what demand or what need is needed.
So, so is it fair to say you're not just focused on like the hardware and like the physical components of a tool?
So we can get into that too at system level, right? So we think about Emat or even ILI in general as a system. So developing the system around Emat or any ILI for that matter is really a function of, you know, the engineering that goes into developing it, the testing, the validation that goes to developing an Emat technology, the analysis piece of it, the support, the field support, running the tool, the execution of it. That data comes back. What do you do with it? So it's a whole system-wide understanding of it.
I got to go back to the March Madness thing. I feel like it's coming together for me. I'm not going to be as serious as Christopher's going to be on this episode.
Okay.
It's just kind of like, you know, so it's like March Madness. Yeah. Everybody just wants to see their team advance in the bracket.
Or the Cinderella. Everybody loves the Cinderella story.
Or the Cinderella. Yeah, I didn't expect it to work, and it worked well. I don't know if you want to think about that way about Emat as an ILI. But I think it's like people
for the record, Emat is not the Cinderella story.
Yeah.
That is not the correlation. It's more like the Duke.
I bet
we're gonna say something like that.
I bet you that's the title of the episode though. Now is Emat the Cinderella story, and everybody's going to listen to the episode. But no, it's kind of like everybody just wants to see their team win, and they just want to see give the ball to somebody and score points.
Blow them out too.
Yeah, blow them out too.
Don't ever want a close game.
Nail 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
That's like getting only 4 Emat calls, and you dig them, and you're like, "This is perfect." Move on to the next one.
The reality is, it's more complex than that, right? If you want to win a ball game, there's a whole lot of preparation that goes into that. There's a coaching staff. There's a plan. There's analyzing the defense before. Yeah. I think when you approach Emat that way, I think that's really something that go into this episode with.
I like where you're going with this. So we're going to hone in on you a little bit, Sean. Right. Do you feel like you had an advantage when you were developing? Because I think you said you stood up the SEC management. Do you think you had a little bit of an advantage having come from an ILI vendor?
With the understanding of what Emat provides, absolutely. And so, I mean, I guess, do you want to touch on that topic a little bit? Like, what does Emat give you?
That's up to you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, no, I think it's interesting because what Emat gives you. I think, unfortunately, a lot of vendors, and I'd say maybe even a lot of operators out there, it's like Emat's just another tool. There's Emat, there's Caliper, and there's MFL, Emat.
The forgotten technology. Which one is that?
IMU. See, I didn't even say it. Going back to another episode. True that. But the reality is, Emat is a different animal.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Sure. I've seen it on the Rosen side. You've seen it on the TDW side. Yeah. I think operators think that the viewing software, everything just looks the same, right? It's just squiggly lines.
or big blobs.
Or big blobs.
Big red blobs.
So I think from the very beginning, you have to start with a different approach of what you're going to get from Emat.
Yeah.
Here's where I want to go, and I think we need to do it together, Chris.
Okay.
So like tip for tat. You're just going to bounce between
right.
Christopher
Let's
and I.
go. Ping pong, ping pong, ping
I need a
pong.
massage after this.
Absolutely, you got to choose who you're going to look at, and I'm trying to constantly steal the ball from because I want to score. And,
Yeah.
I really want you to think about from a standpoint of if you're giving operators guidance, where have you seen operators be most successful in deploying Emat technologies, and what aspects, what did they do right on the court to advance their team in the bracket or get Emat to be that winning technology, not the Cinderella team?
Yeah. Oh, wow. You brought it back to March Madness again. So.
It's going to be the whole episode.
Yeah.
You've seen the snowmobiling
Yeah.
episode. It's like, it's going to be the same thing.
Well, I mean,
It's kind of like the Mad Hatter.
Yeah, it is.
You're bad.
So the experience I have and I can speak to is, we try to host these events or get-togethers with other fellow operators and speak to what are our lesson learns and the challenges that we face and how we can kind of advance the technology and or a program, stand up a program. But I think what I've seen with program success is operators that learn from each other too, and don't be afraid to ask for help, to lean out and say, hey, we're trying to develop this program and understand from the start, what do we do with Emat? How does that work? And how do we integrate that into our program or separate it from a program and manage it, independently? But how do we stand up that program? And I think for an operator to be successful, you really need to understand with what you're getting and what you're actually then looking for and going after.
You see how he picked up the get help line?
No, but
Multiple episodes. I've learned from that too. Yeah.
It makes me think of like the Ragnarok episode where Thor's holding Loki for get help.
Get help, yeah. Not like that though.
Yeah.
But I really like, because we talk a lot sometimes about getting help from people who have knowledge, who maybe sit on the consultant side. But you brought up a really valuable point, which is if you're starting on an Emat program, you may want to get help from other operators who have been there, right? Yeah. And so I know on the early days of Emat, there was the Emat users group. So on the operator side, does such a thing still exist? Can you speak to that now?
Yeah. So it took us a short hiatus with COVID, as a lot of things did. But so we're still hosting that. Intervals kind of to be determined. But that is a forum for operators to get together and collaborate and share lessons learned, kind of understanding, and we can go back to basics too. It's like, well, I get this information, what do I do with it, right? So it's not just, I found Emat reported all this, all these features, what do I do? You don't just go and dig up everything. There's a program side to it as well. And some operators are still figuring, what you mentioned this earlier, I think about the different fracture mechanics models that can be used, right? So there's different models that can be used. How do you respond to, based on the results of those models, how do you respond to what the findings are? But
so y'all get into all this in the Emat users group?
We can. It has a tendency to go all over the place. We kind of just let it.
So how does somebody get into the Emat users group? Is there a secret handshake?
Hold on. Maybe the better question is, does everyone? I mean, from your opinion, does everyone need to be part of the users group, or is there a collaborative culture to where information is generally available?
Yeah, I think there's more to come on that front too with collaboration. Emat users group was a forum that was used to share information about general understanding of Emat, programmatic, development of an SEC management or crack management program. So that was there for a reason, because it was a void. But there's other avenues now that are, there's an API 1176, right, which is really the development how to stand up a crack management program. There's some guidance in there that is very similar to what you talk about in the Emat users group forum.
And those can really complement each other, right? I think if we get specific, I feel like the RP 1176, it kind of gives you that framework to formally go through, this comprehensive process of what are my threats, how am I establishing susceptibility, what fracture mechanics am I going to use. It even describes in the annexes different technologies, right? Whether it's in situ or ILI. Whereas it feels like what you're saying with the users group, and again, I don't think we necessarily need to say everyone needs to be in the users group, but we'll leave that to you.
Yeah.
But there's a supplement of having a network, right, where you can reach out to operators. It doesn't have to be consultants, and say, hey, this is what we're doing. I need help, or what tips do you have, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we've tried to create a forum or a place that allows for new, people that are new to Emat, people that are new to maybe developing a crack management program, to operators that have been doing it for quite some time now, that can provide that maybe sometimes maybe a voice of reason or share similar concerns or lessons learned they've had. But I mean, there's a place for operators to be, and then we also try to bring in we have in the past bring in vendors too to help provide guidance there too, and open the floor a little bit so it's not so just operator centric. Then it opens up.
It's funny. In the intro, we talked a little bit about my previous experience. I remember back in 2008, 2009 timeframe, the Emat users group was going on back then as well, when I was at Energy Transfer. And one of the big takeaways.
Those were the OGs of the Emat users group.
Yeah.
OGs.
Yeah. And I remember back in the day, one of the big pieces of work that I got out of the users group was the NDE protocol. Right, because when you look at an ILI process, right, the ILI will call features and it will characterize them, right, and it's against the performance specification. And so depending on what you're doing in the field or destructively testing, that's how you can gain confidence in that ILI system's ability to give you the data you need to make good, healthy integrity decisions. Is there anything that you could say maybe you specifically benefited from the users group that others could say, oh man, that would be cool?
Yeah. So and I do actually recall that this wasn't 2009 timeframe, but this was probably like 2012, 2013 when then I remember the similar, topics of discussion was using NDE and what technology is out there with NDE to help validate Emat, right? And that still goes on today. But I think more recently, what we focused on, we've tried to bring in more operators too. So there's a growing amount of operators, right, that are bringing or that are utilizing Emat, that are trying to understand it. But one thing we've really tried to hammer home, if you will, is this notion of understanding the data. Like, you really need to understand what is the data telling you. What is there any potential that you have degraded data? Because we said Emat, if you go back to Emat 101, Emat is a different beast. It's the understanding how that acoustic wave propagates through the pipe. What does that give you, right?
I know you want to go here.
Yeah.
I know you want to go here.
This is break time.
Like
So
that's absolutely we're going to do. That is great. We're going to come back. I think we're going to get into 1176, degraded data, and we're going to turn it over to Dr. Chris Alexander for a brief commercial.
Hi, my name is Chris Alexander, and I'm president and founder of ADV Integrity, and we are the proud sponsors of the Pipeline Things podcast led by Rhett Dotson and Christopher DeLeon. In that podcast, they're going to be talking about things like integrity management, pretty much anything related to pipelines, including regulations, technology, and anything that you would need to know. They're also going to be talking about current events. For those of you that don't know anything about ADV Integrity, we're a consulting company. We do full-scale testing. I'm actually here in the lab, and really high-end engineering to serve the pipeline industry. And we would love to hear from you, and really excited about being sponsors of the Pipeline Things podcast.
Welcome back to this episode of Pipeline Things, where we're in the middle of discussing Emat with our dearly valued guest who did not have to be coerced to be on the show, Mr. Sean Moran. So Sean, we need to take a step back after the break. We have to cover a couple of really key topics. So you've seen a couple of threats. One thing that's been standard across our guests is, have you seen bullets on a pipeline?
Yeah, and I knew this question was going to come up too.
Did you prepare for it?
I was on a run, and I was listening to your guys' podcast at the time, and I thought, what am I going to say if I ever get quizzed on that? And I don't have a good story for that, but I did think about it. But no, I've actually never physically seen it. I have seen information, historical information that sabotage, dynamite of those nature.
So here's what he did after the podcast. While he's running, he went home and Googled.
It's a good one.
What else can I say?
All right. The question number 2: is your mom going to listen to this episode?
Now that
She's
you're on
not.
the show.
You know what? She's not an avid listener like your mom, but I do know that after this episode, I'll probably go and create a new username.
Yeah.
Rhett's mom at ADV. and provide
gonna
more
leave it?
comments. Yeah.
Oh,
a positive comment.
So Rhett's mom at ADV will not be. Oh gosh.
That's gonna be fantastic.
Sorry,
All right,
Rhett's
let's bring this back around, guys. So I think where we ended was talking a little bit about the users group and Emat data, and I think one of the messages we want to drive home is Emat is still new to a whole lot of operators.
Yeah.
And earlier, you made a mention to the data looking different, right?
Yeah.
Would you say it's fair that there is going to be a learning curve for an operator who's traditionally understood ILI data and squiggly lines versus them now having to manage Emat, where maybe it's more of like arrays or blobs of data?
Yeah, and I should we need to qualify that, right? Is like, what does that mean when you look at a blob? And so Emat vendors have a very good understanding of what these different technologies, how to analyze them, the visualization of it. As you're new to a different technology, you're going to look at it and you say, well, that looks different. That is not like this. And so like MFL, where you're typically used to seeing different traces, and Emat, you have this it's an acoustic technology, and so you're seeing it visualized in a different format. And so typically when you see something that could be more crack-like, you can
that's actually a good point, right? It is acoustic, and I think a lot of times we have to remember that, right? It's still a magnetic-based tool, like an MFL, right? But it doesn't leverage Hall effect sensors, right? Where it's detecting a change in magnetic flux, but it's an acoustic. So that's actually a really good point.
Because that really, and I think it's something that's lost, right? So, and this is one of the things I think a lot of people struggle when you get to Emat data. We're used to seeing signal amplitudes, and like MFL, the bigger the amplitude, the bigger the feature a lot of times, right? And then when you go into an acoustic technology, it's not necessarily, particularly now with Emat, it has more to do with the frequency that amplitude hits you on, and so it's a different way. Like not every red thing matters. It depends on where that red thing happens in the frequency spectrum. That is really a different way of looking at data. So it's not necessarily the red blobs, it's where the red blobs fall and where the red blobs fall with other things.
And that's something that vendors have a very good understanding of in interpretation of those. I would not expect operators to be able to pick up new Emat data and say, well, this has a different frequency and this has a different amplitude. What does that mean? It really speaks to more like probably more of an advanced understanding of Emat.
Which really speaks, again, one of the things we talked about in previous episodes is talking to the vendor. And your experience, having seen that on the TDW side, was it important for operators that engaged Emat for the first time to really be talking to the vendor?
Yeah, and so, pipeline questionnaires, all that information, you're really trying to draw out that information from the operator as a vendor, trying to say, okay, what is it that do we know what we're going into here with the expectation that the outcome is we find the threat that you're looking for? Are we going into it and maybe going to have negative results because we really necessarily didn't select the right tool for the right job? I think there's an important piece of as a vendor or even an operator having that dialogue and saying, here's our problem. Does this seem to be the solution for the problem that we have?
So I'm in my mind, I have this image, this storyline going where you've been part of the users group for a while now, and you're pretty comfortable in that setting. And here comes a new operator, walking through the door, and they're like, they're that awkward new person, they haven't been fully integrated, they don't have all the lessons learned yet. What tips could you give that new operator, whether they're going to join the users group or not, just in general? If an operator is going to run an Emat as part of their crack management program, throw us just a couple of tidbits that they want to take away if they're listening to the podcast.
I would say if you have contacts, reach out to other operators that maybe have the experience that can help, you can lean on. There's one, rather than recreating the wheel or learning from other people's mistakes, why not leverage other operators who've gone through that whole rigor and learn from it. So having those contacts around industry, even leaning on third-party consultants that have the experience. There's plenty of consultants out there that have that experience, and then API. I'll go back to API 1176 as well. The whole point is to kind of create a framework for where to start, That doesn't necessarily say, okay, here's an Emat tool. Now what do you do? So that's where it's important to have that. Either can reach out to others who have that experience and you have that relationship. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
So if I get this right, didn't 1176, the RP, come out right about when you were standing up the SEC management program for Williams?
Yeah, it was 2016, right? I think it was 2016. Yeah, and so I should caveat, I didn't start till 2017. So the Emac program with Williams was 2015 to 2016 is where it started, and I kind of came in, in the midst of all of that. So I wasn't the one who initially stood that up, but.
I think what I was trying to correlate is it's what was for you personally, right? As an engineer, as someone trying to keep the pipe round, sound, and in the ground, what was your biggest learning curve as it related to SEC management and Emat?
Yeah, well, I guess the actually development of a program, because I had not done that, right? That was my learning curve. I already understood the technology. If you come from a vendor side to an operator, you're going to understand how the technology works. You kind of know the way the pie is made. But on the back side of that, you don't necessarily have that programmatic level understanding. And then there's a piece of what's our risk, like
to dig or not to dig,
right? And understanding, So I think for me it was just, whoa, this is a new program they're trying to stand up.
Yeah,
I had no kind of understanding of how you take something from scratch and create something from it.
So this is like trying to get that bracket and go all the way through to the end, right? You're trying to figure out which teams to put where, but you're trying to see into the future. So based on my experiences when we operated, I'm curious if they're similar to yours. I think a lot of operators, again, when they approach Emat, they're not necessarily prepared on two fronts. And I want to ask if you've seen similar things. A little bit leading of a question, I apologize. But so like when an operator runs MFL, number one, I think they generally understand enough about what's in their pipeline in terms of diameter, wall thickness, and grade, in most cases, to run the failure assessments. And then they know the model to go to, which is B31G.
Right.
In your opinion, how prepared a lot of times do you feel operators are either with material properties, which becomes so critical in crack assessments, and the failure assessment models themselves, and there's no less than 4 out there in the industry. So from your perspective on those two fronts, I'd like to ask you, either from the Williams side or from the TDW side,
or the users group,
or even
the
side, what advice would you give to the new guy walking to the table on the materials properties side and the failure assessment models? You don't have to mention specific ones, but what would you tell them to do?
Yeah, so on the material property side, so these models are all based on fracture mechanics principles, right? And if you're running an Emat tool, you're assessing for cracks. And so to understanding the material properties behind that, I'd say first, I'll point you to code reference, and what does that say, right?
Yep.
And that's if you don't have that,
go to code.
Go to code.
Yep.
Secondly, if you can,
and you're referring to the updated gas rule, just so everybody out there is clear. That's that's CFR 192 and the updated rule where they put in where they put in 712. Thank you. Where they put in 5 and 13 or one in the other one. So. That is a good point. And what if they
4 and 13?
4 and 13. Thank you very much.
I love that.
Gosh,
you're welcome back anytime you want, buddy.
1 and 5, 4 and 13.
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah, dude, I love this.
I had to correct him.
It's kind of like getting smacked on stage. How are you going to recover?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hopefully, Chris Rock.
Chris Rock, can you help me? So, hopefully, some of the audience got that.
Yeah.
So on the materials property side, right, regulations. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I want you to keep that flow going. But beyond regulations, those are somewhat punitive.
They can be.
Yeah, they can be. Where do they go from there?
So if you don't have the particular population of pipe in which you may need to collect fracture toughness data, I guess whenever you have an opportunity to cut out pipe is where you're going to be wanting to send that pipe in for material analysis. And so that's more commonly sharp UV notch testing is a more common approach, but then CTOD, so crack tip opening displacement testing is the more would be a more preferred toughness or fracture toughness data point you'd want to use. So it's collection of that data. So anytime you have the opportunity, so I think of it more opportunistic digs, where you have the opportunity to cut out pipe, collect that material property data, and that's on the fracture toughness side. I don't really want to get into the grade side of things in this.
What about the fracture models, right? So how have you guys? I mean, did you see that a lot at TDW, where people were maybe trying to lean on you guys for fracture models, or
utilizing other models?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's like 4 of them out
there.
there.
Well, everything has a strategy, right? It's kind of like picking your champion based on its conference setup, right? And so similarly, like with your fracture mechanics model, right? I mean, you kind of have to use what works for you. You know, if you're going to leverage Sharpies, then you maybe have a preference of what type model you're going to use. And if you're going to go fracture toughness testing, then you use another.
That was always a challenge at the Emat users group too, because without a doubt, and I don't think you're ever, because there are multiple models out there and available, you know, everybody's got their preference, and I wouldn't say one's better than the other. They all
got the team in the bracket they want to go to the end, and they're going to fight for it.
Better offense or better defense?
There's probably value in having like a multi-method assessment protocol, right? Where is there opportunity to leverage multiple fracture mechanics models, that's.
I'm done with the leading question.
Okay, so I think that's the fracture mechanics models though is you're just gonna it's all over the place. But they're being utilized. It's just you're not having the same standard.
Yeah, I just want to thank you again. Not that we're wrapping up. Just you know, we appreciate you coming and sharing. You know, obviously, you know, Rhett and I coming from a service provider like you did as well, and then now in this role as the people we hope for people to call us for help. I think you've given us some really, really good insights today.
And the podcasters. You guys are just the podcasters too, right?
We have to be more than the podcasters.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Even though, I don't know, people might know us, you know, so people are starting to identify us as Thing 20 and Thing 21. I had a request for swag the other day, so we're going to have to put Miss Producer on that.
Yes, we have to figure out some swag now.
I think if we're
whatever we come up with, you're going to get some. You've been on the show. Like
and I know it's going to be green, too.
Yep. It will definitely be green, except for David Futch's shirt will be brown.
Hey, we should almost think about like if we're things associated with ADV, I wonder if we like mimic that with our guests. So like Futch was guest 1, so he's Thing 1, and Alex McKenzie Johnson.
Oh, I think Chris already had a Thing 1 hat though.
Okay, then we're done.
I don't know. That's probably bad.
Bad idea. See, that's
Chris
a bad pick in the bracket. That was a bad pick in the bracket.
Yep, there you go. Every now and then you shoot a shot and it's an air ball, right? And it just happens, man. That was your air ball. But yeah, no, we do really appreciate you being on, right? And so I want to hit just to recap a little bit, right? So I think again, for those of you out there who, and we're probably Christopher and I after this, usually after a guest comes on, we're going to dive probably into Emat even deeper. I think there's a few key takeaways, and hopefully you guys are following the next couple episodes, right? Which is, you know, number one, Emat is different, and I do agree with you on that. I think when operators approach Emat like any other technology, that's a mistake.
It's kind of like going on the throttle once you're stuck in snow.
That's like
get off the throttle.
You're just gonna bury yourself.
Get off the throttle.
There you go.
Stop and ask for help.
And that's where you turn it over. You call for help. I give you the sled, and I let you bring it out of the place because I'm not getting out.
It works.
It works. You're right. You do it to somebody who's been there before, and you let them get out. I really like what you said about getting help, but in a different category, right? So know that the Emat users group is out there, and they can reach out to you. I'm sure they can reach out to other people to find out how to be a part of that. And then finally is, you know, be prepared when you do that Emat run. You know, think about your toughness data, think about your fraction models, maybe even use a multi-model approach. I like that as well. So any parting thoughts or shots before you go?
Questions for us?
You know, I also wanted to mention too, because we just had this Emat users group, but it was actually in a combined forum, and I think I like that approach. We did a corrosion users group. They did then they called it a crack forum that was more
because they didn't want to call it a crack users group.
They didn't want to. They had a different guest showed up for that one, but if you could have if you could have it was more of a liquid focus, right? And then the Emat users, it's just always been more of a gas focus, but we try to bring them all together, and maybe it's more of a hybrid approach where, you know, liquid and gas users can come together and talk about, you know, not just Emat, but just you know, crack technology.
You know, I got to point to Jerry Rao's book. Jerry Rao said, you know, in his thing that regulations should really just address pipelines because the pipelines themselves don't care about the contents of what's in them. There's some truth to that. So, you know, that's a good place to wrap it up. Sean, I want to thank you for joining us today. For all of you out there, thank you for joining us on this episode of Pipeline Things. It's been a pleasure. Look for more to come on the Emat side, and we will see you 2 weeks from now. Thank you.